This is Far From Home. I'm Scott Gurian. As I mentioned before on this podcast, I haven't been doing much of any traveling over the past year and a half of this pandemic, opting instead to play it safe and mostly stay close to home, aside from the occasional road trip. When the weather's been nice, I've enjoyed outdoor activities like hiking, camping, and kayaking. I'm lucky that even though I live in northern New Jersey, the most densely populated state in all of the US, there's actually a lot of nature around me, so that's been great. I'm also fortunate that I live just outside of New York City, so even though I've spent many years of my life in this area, it's such a big place that I'll pretty much never run out of things to do. As you might imagine, having grown up here, I visited most of the big tourist attractions as a kid. Things like the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, and Rockefeller Center. But when you spend a lot of time in a place and get to know it well, you start to discover some really cool but lesser known areas, and those are the ones I always like to share with friends when they come from out of town. Recently, my colleague Polly Bow was making plans to visit, so he dropped me a line and asked if I could show him around. You might know Polly as the host of the radio Vagabond podcast, who's been to nearly 100 countries. If you're a longtime listener of my show, you may remember his episode I shared a while back about the time he and his daughter joined a tour group in North Korea. This was far from Polly's first time in New York, so I figured I would get him out of Manhattan, where most of the other tourists stay, and bring him around to see some interesting sights in the city's outer boroughs. He ended up making a podcast episode about our experiences that I really enjoyed, so I thought I'd share it with all of you.
I'm in New York, or rather right now I'm in Brooklyn, and in a park where people are playing soccer, or as we like to call it, football, here on a Saturday morning. And on my left side there are the most adorable little kids playing, or kicking cones and trying to kick a ball, and it's so adorable. And on my right there are some grown-ups playing, and they're actually pretty good for Americans. I'm not here to watch football or soccer. I'm here to meet a friend of mine, and even though we've never met, I do call him a friend, and he's one of the best podcasters I know. His name is Scott Gurian, and he does a podcast you've heard me talk about before here on the Radio Vagabond as a podcast recommendation. It's called Far From Home. And we have a lot in common. We've both done radio for many, many years, and we both do a travel podcast. And I'm here in a park in Brooklyn about to meet this guy.
Meet Polly Bow, a full-time traveler and digital nomad from Denmark on an epic journey around the world. This is the Radio Vagabond.
Scott just wrote to me that he's a few blocks away, so while we're waiting for him, let me remind you that this episode is partly supported by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best deals on hotel rooms, guest houses, and hostels and apartments, anywhere where you can get a roof over your head in one simple search. It does that by searching a bunch of the biggest hotel search sites in one simple search. Hotels25.com.
I caught you long enough to stop moving. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah. So, have you...
And I thought, okay, there's got to be somebody...
Scott is going to spend his Saturday with me in Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan, showing me around some interesting places as we chat and get to know each other. We walk over to his car, a nice, big, newer Toyota, and very different from the tiny, older car that played a big part in the first season of his podcast, Far From Home. He lives in nearby Jersey, just across the Hudson River, so today we're close to home.
So Scott, now we're in your car, and I'm kind of surprised this is not a Nissan Micra.
No, it's not. I think I got sick and tired of driving a Nissan Micra after driving it across Europe and Asia, so No more Nissan Micras for me.
No, and maybe we should just take it a little bit back, because obviously I know a lot about why I say that, and people who listen to especially the first season of your podcast Far From Home know what I'm talking about.
So I drove a Nissan Micra, which is a little tiny stick shift car, if people don't know, a little hatchback, all across Europe and Asia about 5 years ago.
And it was not brand new.
It was not. It was a used car, and it had a lot of problems. And I drove, or managed to drive, 18,000 miles, which is 29,000 kilometers, I believe, from the UK to Mongolia and back in this little tiny car that constantly broke down. And that's what I told the story of on the first season of my podcast. So yeah, lots of car trouble. So I don't drive that kind of car on a regular basis.
Yeah. And then whenever I tell people about your podcast, I always say you have to go back and start from the beginning, because that season was just so amazing, and it really got me hooked on listening to it. But a ton of work as well, not only doing the drive, but after as well.
Yes, yeah, it was a lot of preparation for that trip, and then putting my podcast season together. It was a lot of work, but it was kind of a once in a lifetime experience, and I was glad to share it with all my listeners.
It's like the Beverly Hillbillies.
It's not for the faint of heart.
It's the adventure, isn't it? It's just the thing of pushing yourself to the absolute limit, because I think it's going to take us out of our comfort zone, but in a really good way.
From language barriers to car trouble, getting horribly lost to paying bribes to shady traffic cops, it's been quite an amazing experience, and over the coming episodes, I'll be bringing all of you along with me for the ride.
This was a clip from the intro of the podcast Far From Home, where it takes us along on a trip from London to Mongolia in a tiny Nissan Micra. There are so many stories from that trip, and I asked Scott if some of them stand out.
Oh, so many. Visiting Iran as American tourists. It was myself and my brother and two British friends of ours, and just, getting to drive across Iran, and, the friendliness of the people there, and visiting, all the countries in Central Asia that, we had never been to, that most people never go to. Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. Seeing Cappadocia in Turkey, which is really amazing.
Cappadocia?
Yeah. It's these ancient homes that are built into caves where the people live. Very scenic and beautiful. People go in hot air balloons every morning. That was really neat. Driving across Mongolia, which is a fascinating country, has the lowest population density of any country in the world. Just vast open spaces. Beautiful landscapes and scenery. There was just so much to see, so many stories on that trip. It took about 7 weeks to drive the first 11,000 miles from the UK to Mongolia. So, I saw so much. And then on the way back, I drove across Siberia and got to go to Chernobyl.
Because most people, once they get to Mongolia, they leave the car and then get on a plane back to civilization, but you did something else.
No, I decided to drive all the way back for some crazy reason. I wanted to continue seeing more of the world and gathering more stories for my podcast.
But was that just you, or did your brother tag along as well?
No, they all flew home, but I had a friend, my friend Donna, who used to be my neighbor. She's very adventurous, and the last number of years she had actually been house sitting around the world. And she was actually in Copenhagen at that time, was house sitting, and she flew out to Siberia to meet me, and the two of us drove back together. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess she thought, okay, he's made it so far, so what can possibly go wrong?
Well, and she's very adventurous, so she was up for anything, and she was curious to see. She had been thinking about taking the Trans-Siberian Railway, so we just went the same route basically, but by road. So she was curious to see that. So yeah.
So did you do just as much from that part?
No, Siberia, I don't know what I was expecting, but Siberia's not the most interesting place. I guess I should have been surprised. But I did get to go to Tuva, which is really fascinating. I took a Tuvan throat singing lesson.
Yeah, I remember that episode. You even trying to do the...
In one of the episodes from Season 2, Scott visits a remote Russian republic of Tuva to learn about the traditional instruments and the ancient art of throat singing.
Yes.
Okay, so far so good. I think I could handle this. Feeling confident in my abilities, we moved on to the next level.
But now, take this one. More open.
But then it started to get harder.
You are making you should make
I'm so bad at this.
As you could hear, he even attempts throat singing himself. You can read more about this visit and see the photos and videos if you click the link in the episode notes of this episode or go to theradiovagabond.com.
It's a fascinating culture because Russia is such an enormous country and there's so many different regions with different cultures. This was a region, Tuva. It's not a place that many tourists go. It was like a 12-hour trip each way out of the way to get there. And it's a totally different culture. It's just north of Mongolia. So the people, there's they look like almost like they're Mongolian or Asian. They don't look Russian, and they have their own language and culture and everything. So fascinating place.
Yeah. How are you able to communicate?
No, I mean, we always managed to find someone who spoke English. I'm lucky that English is my mother tongue, and so it's like a world language. Like you'll usually find someone somewhere. But even in places where we couldn't find anyone who spoke English, obviously I couldn't do an interview, but you could manage to communicate basic things if you're broken down on the side of the road between Google Translate or hand signals, or they'll know a word or two, and you kind of convey what you're trying to, we need help, send a tow truck or whatever it is.
Yeah.
He only knew a bit of English, so his wife helped translate and tell his story.
They were nomads, and they used to live in the nomadic camp in the western Tuva. They had yaks, cows, sheep, goats, and his grandfather sang throat singing, and Zhenya listened to his grandfather, and he started to try to throat sing himself.
The Radio Vagabond. Gotta keep moving.
And then after that, you've obviously made more episodes from other faraway places.
Yeah. I've so that was the first season of my podcast was that trip. But ever since then, I've kept my show going, and I've continued traveling and telling more fascinating stories from faraway places from my travels around the world. So several stories from when I was in Peru and met a medicine man who we went kind of on this expedition to search for this star-shaped stone that supposedly had magical powers that he saw in a vision. I've told stories from Cambodia, from trying to think where else, Chernobyl, as I said, from the trip back, from all sorts of places of Northern Ireland, about the peace walls there. So there's just so much of the world to see, and I'm very much looking forward to when the pandemic is over that I can travel some more and tell more stories.
Yeah, because right now we're in the New York area, and you live in Jersey, just outside of here, so we're close to home.
Yes, yeah. The past couple of years, I guess now, a year and a half, I have not been traveling, and so I've been pretty much staying home and. Finding adventures closer to home, but I'm fortunate I live in the New York area, so there's so much here. There's so much diversity, so much, so many places in New York City and the surrounding area that I haven't yet explored. I've been doing a lot of hiking, a lot of cooking, trying, experiments in the kitchen with different ingredients from different parts of the world that I've never tried before. I've gotten into home brewing recently. I'm just all kinds of pandemic experiments. So I'm definitely, even though I can't travel, I'm definitely keeping busy and keeping myself entertained.
Here's a clip from one of the episodes in Peru where he met this medicine man he was talking about and attended a hallucinating healing ceremony. all while holding his microphone.
There was a single fluorescent light bulb hanging in the center of the room, which gave everything a cold and clinical look, hardly the comforting atmosphere you would hope for an experience like this. After his song ended, Lucho gave the bottle of ayahuasca a final shake, and then offered me some.
A ver, vamos a empezar, Scott. Yeah.
Just a little, I reminded him. Okay. He poured out about an ounce of it into his wooden cup. I held it up to my nose.
Smells strong. Okay, here we go. Extremely bitter. Ugh. Okay.
And in March 2020, when the pandemic really took off and the world was locking down, I just made my way to Cape Town. You were still here in New York, and we were actually both signed up to be at Africa Burn, which is kind of the African or the South African Burning Man, and we were chatting away about doing some traveling in Africa, but then that didn't happen, and you've been here ever since.
Yeah. I had a whole big trip planned, and I was actually planning on starting out in Morocco, and then going to. I was going to do a story on a film festival in a refugee camp in the middle of the Sahara Desert in Algeria, which would have been really fascinating, but obviously that got postponed because of COVID. And then I was going to fly to South Africa and go to Africa Burn, and I was talking with you about maybe traveling around South Africa and maybe going to Lesotho or Swaziland or somewhere, but unfortunately all that got canceled. But hopefully I'll be able to reschedule it at some point, and we'll be able to do some traveling and reporting together.
Yeah. So what is on your list? Because I guess you have given some thoughts on where to go when the world opens up for real again.
Yeah, I definitely would love to go to that film festival whenever that's rescheduled. There's so many places I'd like to go. I really would like to explore more of South America. I still haven't been to Buenos Aires, and I've heard wonderful things about it from so many people. And just travel more. The only places in South America I've been so far are Peru and Ecuador. I've heard good things about Colombia. I still haven't been to Panama. I know you were there recently. So yes, so many places I'd like to go, and I haven't been to the Caucasus, like Georgia and Armenia. That's on my list.
I'm actually thinking of going there early next year.
Okay.
In that area.
Yeah, I was hoping to go on the Mongol Rally, that big road trip I took a few years ago, but unfortunately we just didn't have time. But for whatever reason, the idea of Georgia and Armenia sounds intriguing to me. So that's on my list. And I don't know, maybe more of Southeast Asia. I haven't been to Vietnam yet. And more of Africa, there's so much I'd like to see.
If travel is your passion, and you want escapism while still upholding your work and family responsibilities, you can travel vicariously from the comfort of your own home. This is the Radio Vagabond Podcast.
One of the cool things about making friends around the world is that they can show you stuff that you wouldn't normally visit. And by this time, we'd already been to a few places. Get ready to take notes if you plan to visit, or like me, revisit New York. Scott is about to share a list of unusual places to visit.
So where are you taking me now?
So you've been to New York several times, and so I figured I would show you some more of the local places, or places that most tourists wouldn't visit. So we've gotten out of Manhattan, and I'm showing you some interesting places in the outer boroughs. We're driving through Brooklyn right now. And I just showed you Brooklyn Bridge Park and the neighborhood called Dumbo, which stands for Down Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass. Kind of a trendy neighborhood there. And we walked through Brooklyn Heights in downtown Brooklyn. We went to the New York City Transit Museum, where...
Fascinating place.
Yeah, they have old subway cars going back over the past century. And so you got to actually walk through some of these old subway cars. And
it's made in an old subway station, so
Yeah.
an obvious place.
Yeah, an old subway station. So that was really cool. And now we are driving to Williamsburg, which is kind of like a hipster neighborhood. And we'll walk around there a bit. And then I'm going to take you up to the Queens Museum of Art. It's the old... World's Fairgrounds, where in the 1960s, I think it was 1962, they had the World's Fair there, and there's the big, I think they call it the Unisphere. It's a giant kind of globe statue thing. There's a big fountain there. It's kind of iconic. People may have seen it in pictures of New York. And then in the Queens Museum of Art, there's this thing that was built for the World's Fair called the Panorama. It's a scale model of every building in every borough of New York City at that time in the 1960s. And it's super cool. You could walk around it, on these like balconies. And it's really impressive. It's neat because it gives you a sense of the scale of the city of New York. You see how tiny Manhattan is and how big Brooklyn and Queens and some of the other boroughs are. And it kind of goes through cycles in the day. It gets dark and then the lights come on in the buildings and there's little airplanes taking off and landing from the airport. It's really neat. I think you'll enjoy that.
In Brooklyn, we walk around a bit and visit a place with a lot of food trucks called Smørgåsbrød. As far as I know, that word comes from the Danish smørrebrød. That's a traditional open-faced sandwich we have in Denmark. And that the Americans started saying it like the Swedish chef from The Muppet Show. Unfortunately, we didn't find any Danish smørrebrød at Smørgåsbrød. Another thing we couldn't find was Scott's car.
So Scott, what are we doing?
We're looking for my car. I forgot where I parked. We'll find it.
We simply could not remember where we parked it. After an hour of searching, Scott walked up to a police car and asked if they'd seen it.
Between 3rd and 4th, and I'm not finding it. It was a Toyota Prius.
Plate number, Andy?
The what?
You have the plate number?
Yeah.
They were actually able to look up the license plates and could tell him that he went through a toll booth earlier that day. Yeah, Big Brother's watching.
What are you able to see? That you could see a whole record of the... That's probably when I came into the city.
But not where it is right now. So we continue the search.
On his cell phone, he's able to see my whole record of where I've driven from the, I guess, he's asked, was I driving it at 9:52 this morning? Or I guess he could see when I came in through the tolls in the tunnel. I know, it's creepy.
I really wasn't paying much attention to where we parked. But I did point in one direction and said that I felt it was that way. But Scott wasn't convinced.
Good thing we're not in Kazakhstan.
Oh, you know what? I think I just figured out.
Finally, something clicked for Scott.
We're on north. Well, I was looking. I know I parked between 3rd and 4th, but we're looking at north, 3rd and 4th, and I think it changes over to south up here. So I think we're on between south, 3rd and 4th, not north. So I remembered correctly, but the wrong direction. I think that's what it is. Hopefully, we'll see.
And I'm not the guy who says I told you so. I was pointing in this direction.
No, you were pointing the other direction.
No.
Oh. I was just going by my memory, but I think my memory is correct, but just the wrong direction.
And soon after, we found it. We'll be right back.
Life is short. There is so much to explore. I won't let a second go to waste. Yeah, time goes fast. I better step it up now. Take some chances, cut some ropes. Ooh, ain't gonna wait much longer. There will be no sleep tonight. I'll chase my dreams while I'm still young and single. Nothing's gonna stop me, no. I have to run, 'cause life is now.
can follow Palabo on his Facebook page. Join the conversation about traveling and being a digital nomad. You can also see pictures, videos, and stories that don't necessarily make it into the podcast. Simply search for the Radio Vagabond.
Scott, now that we've found your car, I thought I'd ask you, did on the trip from London to Mongolia, did you have any encounters with the law enforcement there? Because we just spoke to a police officer.
Oh yeah, in Tajikistan, for example, there's a lot of corruption in a lot of these countries and places like Central Asia, and my brother and my friends and I got pulled over by some traffic cops who actually aimed their radar gun at another car and then tried to say that it was us and that we were speeding, and were demanding that we give them $100. And it took quite a while of talking to them we finally got out of it and managed to give them a bottle of vodka and get out of the situation.
A bottle of vodka?
Yeah, we were resisting for the longest time. We didn't want to give them anything because we don't want to feed into the corruption and bribery that's common in these countries. But we were about to threaten, calling the embassy, which usually works in situations like that. And, it just takes a lot of patience, and, you don't back down and keep fighting. And eventually we just wanted to get out of the situation, so we gave him some vodka. But I covertly recorded the whole encounter on tapes. I have audio of the whole encounter, so it was quite an interesting experience.
Yeah. My brother and I walked over to ask Rosie what was going on. She insisted Jane wasn't speeding. The police are trying to scam us, and this is bollocks, she said.
We just keep on playing dumb, and we keep on asking for a translator. And you got somebody on the telephone, but we didn't understand them.
One of the officers handed my brother his cell phone and put it on speaker so we could all listen in to the person on the other end of the line.
Hello? Wait, what?
$100, he repeated.
We do not have that. No. We do not have. We're tourists driving. We're students. Yeah, we're students. We're in university.
He laughed, clearly not believing us. I can't help you, he said. It was pretty clear this whole thing was a ruse.
Hello, mister. Yes.
They're telling me that if you don't pay, they'll take your documents and send them to the police station in Dushanbe, he warned.
Sir, they're threatening us right now.
We went around in circles like this for 15 or 20 minutes without making much progress. Rosie still thought that giving them cash was out of the question, but maybe, she figured, there was another form of currency they'd accept. She opened the trunk and rummaged through her suitcase, returning a moment later holding a bottle.
You know, and I know, we're not speeding, okay? You give us the documents, I'll give you that, we go, okay? It's good vodka, we've been drinking this vodka.
The guy in the phone was still listening in, and he laughed. The police officers smiled but resisted, holding out hope that they could still strike a better deal.
Oh, come on, we have not got $100. We need to go there.
You can hear more about what happened when they met the police in Tajikistan in episode 16 of Far From Home, season 1.
Yeah. And then there were several instances like that. We were pulled over actually a couple times in Kyrgyzstan as well, but they actually had legit speed cameras there, and I guess we really were speeding there. And they were super nice, and they managed to let us out of it. But yeah.
And when you actually were speeding, you were patting the Nissan, saying, "Oh, good boy."
We had another situation on the way back. My friend Donna and I were stopped in Kazakhstan. The road signs in some of these countries are so bad. There was like a place where the road split, and so if you continued going straight, it like turned into a one-way, and we were supposed to go to the right. And we didn't realize that because there was like a little tiny sign, but not like right where it split. There wasn't an arrow saying bear to the right like I would be used to seeing back home. And so I guess we were for a brief distance going the wrong way. But, there was like a gas station right there. We were going to get gas. But I guess there was like a traffic camera or something. So a little farther on down the road, like we got pulled over, and this cop was threatening to take our driver's licenses, and we'd have to go to Almaty, the capital, to like go to traffic court and everything, like as if we were going to fly back to Almaty to go to traffic court. But it took quite a while of negotiating and threatening to call the embassy before we finally got out of that. But that was kind of a stressful situation.
But have you ever felt that you were in danger, that, okay, this could turn really bad?
Not like serious danger. I mean, there's been situations in retrospect where maybe we took a little bit more chances than we should have. In Iran, I didn't have a journalist visa, but I was doing some sort of journalism there, and I was, recording interviews with people. And yeah, there was one day just like walking through a city park in Tehran, and I just had, walking with this guy we met, and I was just had out my recorder and walking along with him. And I was so absorbed in the interview, I wasn't really paying attention to my surroundings. And my brother was getting really nervous, and he later said to me that we walked right past some kind of military soldier or someone who was kind of looking at me. And I could have potentially gotten in really big trouble for being an undercover journalist in Iran. Like, I wasn't doing serious journalism about the government or anything. I was just interviewing local people. But, they sometimes they're paranoid in some of these places, and they say you're a spy or something. Yeah. So that was probably a risk I should not have taken.
Yeah, like when I went to North Korea, I left all my microphones in my bag in China, and recorded everything on my phone. But I wouldn't think not to do that in Tehran. I did it in Iran. I had my microphones there. Iran, that was before I started the podcast, but I don't know if I would even think about it.
Maybe it's not as big of a situation with you because you're Danish, and I feel like Americans are more likely to say you're spies. I don't know. But
yeah,
possibly.
Yeah, we're the good guys.
I think they just don't have any perceptions of Danes, probably.
Oh wow.
I don't know.
I came there right after the Mohammed cartoon crisis, and they were Danish, and actually there were some people that asked me, "Are you afraid to be here because you're Danish?" And saying, "No, should I be?"
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was a good time when I was in Iran. That it was right after, it was while Obama was president, and the nuclear agreement had just been signed. So at that time, people were thrilled to see us and very happy to meet Americans.
Every time I speak to people who's been to Iran, they say that they're the nicest people.
Yeah, definitely. Of all my travels everywhere I've been, and I've met a lot of nice people. Like, Cubans are very friendly and eager to meet you. Alaskans are very nice, but Iran, more than anywhere else, just this sense of Persian hospitality. You meet complete strangers, and you start chatting with them, and within 5 minutes, they're so thrilled to practice their English, and they want to invite you to come to their homes, come for tea, come for dinner, meet their families, stay with them. Like, incredibly warm. Yeah.
That's all for this episode. Thank you so much to Scott Gurian for taking me around the New York area on this beautiful Saturday. I hope to team up with him later and do some traveling somewhere in the world. Remember to follow the Radio Vagabond wherever you listen to audio. Search the Radio Vagabond, and remember to search the Radio Vagabond and not just Radio Vagabond, because otherwise you get the Danish version, and I don't think you want that. My name is Palabo, and I gotta keep moving. See ya.
Thanks so much to Polly Bo for featuring me on his show. Go check out the Radio Vagabond wherever you get your podcasts, and listen to recent episodes he's released from places like Sri Lanka, Rio de Janeiro, Guatemala, and Bali. As for my show, I'll be back in a few weeks. Thanks for listening.